I'm Larry Berger, head of the Department of Animal Science at the University of Nebraska. There's never been a more exciting time to be involved in animal agriculture. Global food needs will increase dramatically in the next 35 years. By 2050, it's estimated that the world population will grow to over 9 billion people. At the same time, the standard of living of much of the world's population will increase, and this will result in an increased demand for animal products. The combination of increased population size and increased standard of living means that we need to produce nearly twice as much food on the same amount of land using less natural resources. Ruminants are essential to optimize food production. Over 70% of all the ag land in the world are grasslands. Grasslands are best converted to food through grazing ruminants. The USDA estimates that only 9% of the pasture land in the United States is suitable for crop production. Converting this grassland into crop production has great ecological risk. When grasslands are tilled, there's a destruction of the habitat for many of the wildlife and other species that normally use that grassland. Also, we will see an increase in wind and water erosion because often these grasslands are on steep or sandy soil that's very erodible once the forage is removed. Also, we will increase the amount of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere when the soil is tilled because the oxygen in the soil will combine with the fiber and convert it to carbon dioxide, which is then released into the atmosphere. Ruminants have the unique ability to convert the solar energy that's stored in plant products to usable food. The most important food components are meat, milk, and we get additional products such as wool and leather. Ruminants are able to do this because of the symbiotic relationship between the animal and the microflora. Ruminants have 4 compartments to their stomach. The rumen, the reticulum, and the omasum all contain microflora such as bacteria, protozoa, and fungi. This combination causes an anaerobic fermentation that produces volatile fatty acids or VFAs. These volatile fatty acids can then provide approximately 70% of the animal's energy requirement. Under anaerobic conditions, the carbohydrates are fermented by the bacteria and protozoa through the enzymes that break down those carbohydrates to simple sugars. This fermentation is without oxygen, and so methane is a natural byproduct of the anaerobic fermentation. Why are we concerned about methane production? Well, methane is one of the greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases, when released into the atmosphere, can trap heat, and this has the potential to increase the surface temperature. Globally, ruminants produce approximately 40% of all the methane released into the environment. In the U.S., our cattle population only produce about 20% of the total methane production. Now, methane has always been a natural product in our ecosystem. For example, it's estimated that in the early 1800s, over 60 million bison grazed the high plain area along with deer, elk, and antelopes. These bison have a microbial population in their rumen similar to that of cattle, and thus we always had a large amount of methane being released into the environment. This is of greater concern now because we know the impact that it can have on greenhouse gas production. So we need to look at opportunities to reduce methane production. Changing the microbial population is one of the ways that we can shift the metabolism in the rumen so that we get more usable end products and less methane. Changing the diet can also increase the efficiency of the rumen fermentation. For example, high energy diets increase propionate and decrease acetate production. This in and of itself would cause a reduction in the amount of methane. Ionophores are compounds that can influence the gram-negative and gram-positive populations so that we shift to a more favorable population mixture that results in less methane. These ionophores do this by changing the rate of ion transport through cell membranes, which favors the gram-negative population and results in less methane-producing bacteria. Essential oils have been added to the diet that can shift the metabolism of individual species of bacteria, and this seems to result in a metabolic pathway that reduces methane. Finally, by feeding unsaturated fatty acids, we can shift the microbial fermentation such that the hydrogen that would normally be used to form methane actually replaces the double bonds in the unsaturated fat, and thus the unsaturated fat becomes saturated and serves as a hydrogen sink and thus results in less methane. Research is needed to examine alternative pathways for reducing methane production. For example, it's critical for us to understand the metabolic pathways that goes on in the rumen and how various pathways can be altered to shift away from methane. For example, if we can increase the amount of propionate and decrease the amount of acetate production, this in and of itself will result in more of those hydrogens going into a useful function in the form of protein and less being released as methane. We know that shifts in the different feedstuffs that we feed animals can change methane production, and we need to do research to understand how this change in diet has an effect on the microbial population and thus influences the bacterial population in the rumen. Finally, we know that the genetics of the host animal can indirectly influence the microbial population, which in turn influences the microbial fermentation and then finally methane production. So all of these are important areas of research that need to be evaluated to look at alternative methods for increasing the usable energy that we obtain as a result of the rumen fermentation. In summary, the demand for food will increase dramatically in the next 35 years. Ruminants are important in harvesting the energy stored in forages on grasslands. Over 70% of all the ag land in the world are grasslands. Methane is a normal byproduct of the rumen fermentation when forages are converted to volatile fatty acids. To shift the microbial population in such a way that we can reduce the methane production while maintaining the amount of food produced from harvesting these forages is an important area of research. Thank you.